This girl tells the millionaire there's someone in his basement, all while he was renovating the old mansion. Then they go upstairs and upon opening the sealed door, discover something shocking. The rusty gate of the century-old mansion groaned like a cry of suffering when Bartholomew Vance first pushed it open. It was a warm autumn afternoon in Fairhaven, and the fall sun painted the yellowed walls of the estate with golden hues that couldn't disguise decades of abandonment. At 52, Bartholomew never imagined he'd inherit this large house from his great-aunt Hope Cunningham, a reclusive woman he'd only visited 3 times throughout his childhood. The mansion stood before him like a ghost of the past, with its peeling wooden windows and the wild garden that had swallowed the stone paths. As owner of Vance Construction, Inc., one of the most respected civil construction companies in the region, Bartholomew had a trained eye for old structures. This property would need months of renovation to become habitable again, but there was something about it that called to him inexplicably. Bartholomew walked through the dusty rooms, making mental notes of the necessary repairs, when he heard a sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible, coming from the front gates. Small steps dragging on the gravel, followed by a low, desperate cry. When he opened the main door, he found a little girl, about 4 years old, standing on the other side of the fence. Her blonde hair was disheveled, her clothes dirty and torn, and tears streamed down her rosy cheeks as she clutched the iron bars with her small hands. "Please, sir," the child said in a trembling voice, "my daughter is in the attic. She's very scared." Bartholomew felt the air leave his lungs. The girl looked at him with huge blue eyes, filled with an anguish that seemed too old for someone so small. She spoke of her daughter as if she were a desperate mother, but she was just a child. "What's your name, little one?" he asked, crouching down to her height. "Lily," she replied, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "My daughter has been alone up there for a long time. She needs me." A strange feeling overcame Bartholomew. It wasn't just confusion at the girl's nonsensical words, but something deeper, an unease that began to grow in his chest, as if something within him recognized a truth his rational mind rejected. "Lily, where are your parents?" he asked gently, opening the gate to approach her. The girl shook her head, more tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know. I just know my daughter needs me. She's in this house's attic crying." Bartholomew looked at the mansion behind him. The attic had been sealed since he arrived. In fact, during his brief visit the week before to receive the inheritance keys, the family lawyer had mentioned that the upper floor had been closed for decades, even before Hope's death. "Lily, there's no one in the attic," he tried to explain. "The house has been empty for a long time." But the girl had already started walking towards the mansion, as if she knew every stone of the path. Her demeanor changed completely, the desperate sadness replaced by an unwavering determination that impressed Bartholomew. "She's there," Lily repeated, stopping at the main door. "I can hear her crying every night." Against his better judgment, Bartholomew found himself opening the mansion door and following the little girl into the shadowy interior. Lily walked through the corridors as if she knew them by heart, avoiding loose floorboards and sidestepping furniture covered with white sheets. They reached a narrow staircase leading to the second floor. Bartholomew had never been up there. During his previous visits, he had only focused on the ground floor. But Lily didn't hesitate, climbing the steps with the confidence of someone who had made that journey many times. At the end of the second-floor hallway, there was a smaller door, almost hidden behind a heavy bookshelf. Lily pointed to it with her small finger. "It's in there," she said simply. Bartholomew pushed the bookshelf with effort, revealing a wooden door with an old lock. To his surprise, when he turned the handle, the door opened easily, as if someone had made sure it wouldn't get stuck over time. What he found beyond the door left him speechless. The attic was not a dusty storage space as he expected. It was a perfectly preserved children's room, as if time had stopped decades ago. A small bed with a white canopy occupied the center of the room, surrounded by carefully arranged antique toys, porcelain dolls, wooden toy cars, children's storybooks stacked on low shelves. On the walls, framed photographs showed a blonde girl, about 6 years old, playing in the mansion's garden, smiling at the camera, embracing a woman Bartholomew recognized as a younger version of his great-aunt Hope. But what shocked him most was the striking resemblance between the child in the photographs and Lily, who now stood beside him, observing the room with a look of profound sadness. "Violet," Lily whispered, as if speaking the name of someone very dear. Bartholomew turned to the girl, his heart pounding. "How do you know that name?" Before Lily could answer, an inexplicable wind swept through the attic, making the window curtains dance and scattering some papers from a small study table. When Bartholomew bent down to collect them, he discovered they were children's drawings, birds flying over mountains, colorful flowers, and always the same signature, Violet, 1975. "She draws a lot," Lily said, as if commenting on someone she had just seen. "She likes birds because she wants to fly away." The attic's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Bartholomew felt a shiver run down his spine as he watched Lily pick up a porcelain doll from the bed. It was identical to one the girl herself carried, only more worn by time. "Lily, how did you get into this house before? Who brought you here?" The girl looked at him with those huge blue eyes, and for a moment Bartholomew had the impression he was talking to someone much older than a 4-year-old. "I always come here," she replied, "to take care of my daughter. She gets very sad when she's alone." At that moment, the sound of footsteps echoed through the second-floor hallway. Bartholomew turned quickly, expecting to find someone, but when he looked back, Lily had disappeared completely, leaving only the porcelain doll on the bed and the echo of her voice saying, "She needs you now." Bartholomew descended the mansion stairs with trembling legs, clutching the creaking wooden handrail at every step. The encounter with Lily had left his mind in a whirlwind, and the porcelain doll he still held in his hands felt like a burning ember between his fingers. How could a 4-year-old know this place so intimately? And who was Violet? Throughout the night, Bartholomew couldn't take his eyes off the documents spread across the table in his house in downtown Fairhaven. He had scoured all the inheritance papers, looking for any mention of a child named Violet, but the official family records were frustratingly brief. Hope had lived alone in the mansion since the 1980s, with no known children, no registered adoptions. The next morning, he decided to look for someone who might know about his great-aunt's past. Eleanor Dawson, director of the Fairhaven Children's Home, had been a close friend of Hope's for decades. If anyone knew family secrets, it would be her. The home was a welcoming white building on the outskirts of Fairhaven, surrounded by well-kept gardens where children played under the supervision of caregivers. Bartholomew found Eleanor in her office, a 59-year-old woman with grey hair pulled back in a practical bun and kind eyes that lit up at the sight of him. "Bartholomew! What a surprise," she said, standing up to greet him. "I heard you inherited Hope's property. She always spoke fondly of you." "Eleanor, I need to ask you some questions about my great-aunt," he began, sitting in the offered chair. "I found some things in the mansion that have left me confused." "Of course, dear. How can I help you?" Bartholomew took a deep breath. "Did you know any child who lived with Hope? A girl named Violet?" Eleanor's face instantly changed. Color drained from her cheeks, and her hands began to tremble slightly. She stood up and carefully closed the office door before sitting back down. "How did you know about Violet?" she asked in a low voice. "I found a room in the mansion's attic, full of toys, photographs, drawings signed by her. Hope never told me she had raised a child." Eleanor was silent for a long moment, her hands clasped on the table. "Bartholomew, this is a very painful story. Hope made me promise I would never tell anyone in the family. But she's gone, Eleanor, and I need to understand what's happening." The director sighed deeply. "Violet came into our lives in 1970. Hope found her abandoned in front of Main Street Church, a 3-year-old girl, thin and frightened. Back then, adoption processes were less bureaucratic. Hope fell in love with the child at their first meeting." Bartholomew leaned forward. "And what happened to her?" "Violet was a special child, very intelligent, but also different. She said strange things, seemed to know about people she'd never met. Hope believed the girl had some kind of special intuition. What kind of things did she say? Eleanor hesitated. She talked about a daughter who didn't exist, constantly drawing birds. Said she needed to care for someone who was alone. The same behaviors that what? That we observed in Lily. Bartholomew's heart stopped for an instant. You know Lily. Of course I know her. She ran away from our home 3 months ago. We've been desperately looking for her. Eleanor stood up and went to a file cabinet, pulling out a folder. Lily came to us a year ago, found by social services wandering the streets of Fairhaven. No relatives were located. She's a traumatized child, but extraordinarily intelligent. She showed photographs of Lily to Bartholomew. The resemblance to the antique photos of Violet was even more striking side by side. Eleanor, yesterday Lily appeared at the mansion. She knew the way to the attic, knew Violet's name, talked about a daughter who needed care. The director closed her eyes for a moment. Bartholomew, there are things in this world we can't fully explain. Hope always believed that some souls are connected through time and space. Violet disappeared in 1977 during a terrible storm. Disappeared how? We never found out. Hope woke up one morning and only found a note from the girl saying she needed to find her daughter. She was 8 years old at the time. The police searched for months but never found any trace. Bartholomew felt a chill run down his spine. And you believe Lily has some connection to Violet? I believe some stories don't end when we think they do, Eleanor replied enigmatically. Hope spent the rest of her life waiting for Violet to return. She kept the girl's room exactly as it was, believing that one day she would come back. At that moment, a home employee urgently knocked on the door. Eleanor, you need to come quickly. We found Lily in the garden. She appeared out of nowhere and is asking to speak with the man from the mansion. Bartholomew and Eleanor rushed to the garden, where they found Lily sitting under an oak tree, drawing in the dirt with a stick. Upon seeing Bartholomew, her eyes lit up. Did you find her? Lily asked, getting up and running to him. I found the room, Lily, but no one was there. The girl shook her head sadly. She hides when there are too many people. Violet is shy now, but she needs you. She needs someone who understands. Eleanor approached slowly. Lily, dear, how do you know the name Violet? She told me. At night, when I dream, she comes to talk to me. She says she's trapped in the attic for a long time and can only leave when someone from her family comes to help. Bartholomew knelt in front of Lily. Why do you say she's your daughter? Lily gently touched Bartholomew's face with her small hand. Because when you love someone very, very much, they become your family. Violet needs a real daddy now, someone who won't leave. The girl's words hit Bartholomew like lightning. He had never had children, something that had always saddened him, especially after his wife passed away in a car accident 5 years ago. Loneliness had become his constant companion. Lily, would you like to help me take care of the mansion? He asked impulsively. Eleanor looked at him with surprise, but Lily smiled for the first time since he had met her. Can we take care of Violet together? She asked. We can try, Bartholomew replied, not knowing exactly what he was promising. That afternoon, after intense conversations with Eleanor about legal procedures and temporary guardianship, Bartholomew took Lily back to the mansion. The girl walked beside him with a confidence that contrasted with her apparent fragility. When they reached the attic, Lily picked up the porcelain doll and hugged it lovingly. Now she has a real daddy, she whispered to the doll. Someone who will stay. But when Bartholomew turned to organize some toys, he heard Lily talking softly to someone he couldn't see. Yes, Violet, I know you're scared. But he's nice. He's going to help us find what you're looking for. Bartholomew turned slowly. Lily was sitting on the bed, seemingly talking to thin air, but there was a second mark on the quilt beside her, as if an invisible person was sitting there. 3 weeks had passed since Lily began living in the mansion with Bartholomew, and the businessman's life had changed completely. He woke up every morning to the sound of the girl humming in the attic, a sad melody she said she had learned from Violet. During the day, Lily followed him around the house like a silent shadow, always carrying her porcelain doll and making disturbing observations about things a 4-year-old shouldn't know. Bartholomew had hired Isabel Miller, a 34-year-old architect specializing in historical preservation, to help with the mansion's renovation. Isabel was a determined woman, with brown hair always tied back in a practical ponytail and green eyes that seemed to evaluate every detail around her. But there was something melancholic in her way of speaking, a sadness she tried to hide behind her professional efficiency. "Bartholomew, I need to talk to you about the second-floor project," Isabel said on an April morning, spreading architectural plans on the kitchen table. "There are some structural irregularities that worry me." Lily was sitting in the corner of the kitchen, drawing birds in a notebook Bartholomew had bought for her. Occasionally, the girl looked up and watched Isabel with an intensity that made the architect uncomfortable. "What kind of irregularities?" Bartholomew asked, pouring coffee for both of them. "The attic walls are double thick in some places. It's as if there are hidden spaces between them. And I found strange marks on the floorboards, as if heavy furniture had been dragged repeatedly over the years." Lily stopped drawing and looked directly at Isabel. "Violet hid important things," she said naturally. She knew someone would come looking one day. Isabel felt a shiver run down her spine. Since she started working on the mansion, she had witnessed events that defied her rationality. Objects that moved when she wasn't looking, inexplicable cold drafts, and most notably the constant feeling of being watched. "Lily, what kind of things did Violet hide?" Bartholomew asked, already accustomed to the girl's mysterious revelations. "Sad memories. Papers that made her cry. A box with her family's secrets." Isabel exchanged a meaningful glance with Bartholomew. During her years restoring old houses, she had learned that families always hid secrets within the structures of their homes. "Can I show you where it is?" Lily offered, standing up and walking towards the stairs. The three went up to the attic, where the atmosphere always seemed denser. Lily went directly to one of the side walls and placed her small hand on the paneling. "Here," she said simply. Isabel examined the wall with a professional eye. "There really is a difference in the sound," she confirmed, tapping lightly on the wood. "This section is hollow." Bartholomew grabbed a hammer and began carefully removing the wooden panels. Behind them, he found a small compartment containing a rusty metal box, the size of a shoebox. When he opened the box, he discovered documents yellowed by time, old photographs and handwritten letters. Among the papers, there were birth certificates, adoption papers, and to his surprise, documents that mentioned his family name. "My God," Isabel murmured, reading over his shoulder. "Violet was your older brother Charles's biological daughter." Bartholomew felt the world spin around him. Charles had died in a motorcycle accident when he was just 19, 2 years before Bartholomew himself was born. He had never known his brother had left a daughter. "Hope hid this from the family," Isabel continued, examining a letter. "It says here that she officially adopted Violet to protect the family's reputation. The girl's mother was very young and unmarried." Lily approached Bartholomew and took his hand. "Violet always knew she was your real niece. That's why she's been waiting for you for so long." At that moment, the attic temperature plummeted dramatically. The curtains began to sway without wind, and the papers scattered on the bed flew around the room as if an invisible gust had captured them. Isabel instinctively recoiled, but Lily remained calm, as if accustomed to such phenomena. "She's happy," the girl said, smiling at an empty spot in the air. "Violet is happy because now you know the truth, but the joy was short-lived." That afternoon, as Bartholomew tried to process the discovery about his lost niece, he received a call that would change everything. "Bartholomew?" said a cold female voice on the other end of the line. "It's Theodora, your sister," Bartholomew sighed. Theodora, 2 years his junior, had always been the most ambitious in the family. A lawyer, she had moved to New York City decades ago and maintained minimal contact with the family. "Hi, Theodora. How did you get my number?" "I heard you inherited Aunt Hope's property. I need to talk to you urgently about it." "What do you want, Theodora?" "I want my share of the inheritance, obviously. And I also heard you're living there with a child. Is that true?" Bartholomew felt a tightness in his chest. "I'm caring for a girl, yes, but that's none of your business." Bartholomew, you can't just pick up a child off the street and decide to raise her. There are laws, procedures. And if you're mentally unstable, you can't manage an inheritance of this magnitude. Mentally unstable? What are you talking about? I spoke to some acquaintances in Fairhaven. They say you've been talking to yourself, that you hired an expensive architect to renovate a house that should be sold, that you're spending fortunes on fantasies about ghost children. Bartholomew felt anger rise in his throat. Theodora, don't call me again with such nonsense. It's not nonsense, brother. I've already hired a lawyer. If you don't sell the property and split the money with me within 30 days, I'll file a lawsuit questioning your mental capacity to manage the inheritance. The call ended, leaving Bartholomew with his hands trembling with anger and fear. Theodora had always been capable of causing problems, but now she threatened to separate him from Lily. When he went up to the attic to talk to the girl about the situation, he found Lily sitting on the floor, crying silently. What happened, little one? Violet is very sad, Lily sobbed. She heard the phone conversation. She's afraid you'll leave, like all the other people she loved. Bartholomew knelt beside Lily and hugged her. I won't leave, I promise. But the mean woman will try to separate us, Lily said, snuggling into his arms. Violet has seen this happen before. People always leave when others say bad things. That night, while Lily slept in the room he had prepared for her on the second floor, Bartholomew remained awake in the attic, surrounded by the documents he had found. Among the papers, he discovered something he hadn't noticed before, a series of Violet's medical reports, dated 1976. The documents revealed that the girl had begun to exhibit strange behaviors in the months before her disappearance. She constantly talked about an imaginary daughter, compulsively drew birds, and showed knowledge of family events she had never witnessed. Exactly like Lily. Bartholomew closed his eyes and tried to find a rational explanation for everything that was happening. But when he opened them again, he found Isabel standing at the attic entrance. Sorry to bother you, she said, looking distraught. I couldn't sleep and saw the light on. May I come in? Of course. I'm having a rough night too. Isabel sat beside him on the floor. Bartholomew, I need to tell you something. 2 years ago, I lost my son, Peter, in a household accident. He was 5. Since then, I've avoided projects involving children because it's too painful. Bartholomew looked at her with understanding. Why did you take this job then? Because when I first saw Lily, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A desire to protect, to care. It's as if she awakened the mother in me again. At that moment, they both heard small footsteps coming up the stairs. Lily appeared at the attic entrance, her eyes swollen from sleep. I couldn't sleep, she said, approaching the two. Violet is restless. She knows difficult times are coming. Lily sat between Bartholomew and Isabel, taking each of their hands. But she also knows that now we have a real family, the girl said, smiling. One that won't separate no matter what happens. And for a moment, in the silence of the attic filled with memories and mysteries, the three felt a strange peace, as if an invisible presence had finally found what it had been looking for so long. 2 weeks after Theodora's threat, the mansion had become an emotional battlefield. Bartholomew received daily calls from lawyers. Isabel tried to accelerate the renovation to legitimize the project, and Lily had become increasingly silent, spending hours talking to her invisible presence in the attic. On a rainy Monday morning, Oscar Hayes, the private investigator hired by Theodora, appeared at the mansion door. He was a 44-year-old man, thin and wearing glasses, carrying a briefcase full of documents and a camera. Mr. Vance, he said in a formal voice, I need to make some checks on the property conditions and the child living here. Bartholomew reluctantly welcomed him, knowing that every word would be used against him in the lawsuit. Oscar walked through the house making notes, photographing rooms, and questioning every detail of Lily's routine. And this child, where exactly did she come from? The investigator asked, observing Lily, who was silently playing with her doll in the corner of the room. She's the daughter of a former employee of mine, Bartholomew lied, following his lawyer's advice not to mention the children's home or the mysterious circumstances. Do you have documents to prove that? Before Bartholomew could answer, Lily stood up and walked to Oscar with disturbing confidence. "You shouldn't be here, sir," she said, looking directly into his eyes. "Violet doesn't like people who want to hurt families." Oscar laughed nervously. "She's just an imaginative child," he muttered, taking notes. But when he turned to photograph the staircase, he inexplicably tripped and fell, scattering all his papers on the floor. His camera shattered, and all the photos he had taken mysteriously appeared completely blank when he tried to view them. "That's odd," he murmured, picking up the debris. "The camera was working perfectly this morning." Lily smiled discreetly and returned to her doll as if nothing had happened. That afternoon, after the investigator's disturbing departure, Eleanor arrived at the mansion with urgent news. "Bartholomew, I need to tell you something I found in the old records of the home," she said, clearly agitated. "I found adoption records that could change everything." They gathered in the living room, Bartholomew, Isabel, Eleanor, and Lily, as the children's home director spread yellow documents on the coffee table. When Violet disappeared in 1977, Hope never stopped looking for her. "For years, she kept in touch with me, always hoping the girl would return. But what I never told you is that Violet didn't simply vanish." Eleanor took a deep breath. "She ran away because she discovered that Hope planned to send her to a strict boarding school in New York City. The girl left a letter saying she was going to look for her true family, and that she would return when she found her daughter." "But she was an 8-year-old child," Isabel protested. "How could she survive alone?" "She wasn't alone. I helped her." The silence in the room was absolute. Lily stopped playing and looked directly at Eleanor with her piercing blue eyes. "You hid Violet all these years," the girl said, not as a question, but as a statement. Eleanor nodded, tears beginning to stream down her face. "I was young then, working as a social worker. When Violet appeared in my office, desperate and scared, I couldn't send her back to Hope. The girl begged me to help her find a place where she could stay until she grew up." "Where did you hide her?" Bartholomew asked, his heart racing. "With an adoptive family in Springfield, Massachusetts. They were good people who understood the situation. Violet grew up there, studied, graduated. When she turned 18, she came to find me." Eleanor picked up a photograph from the folder and showed it to everyone. It was a young blonde woman, about 25 years old, holding a baby in her arms. "This is Violet at 25, with her newborn daughter. She married a young man from Springfield and had a happy life for a few years." Bartholomew took the photograph with trembling hands. The resemblance of the woman in the photo to Lily was striking, but there was something else, something familiar in her face that reminded him. "My God," he whispered, "she looks like me. She looks like our family." "Because she was your family," Eleanor confirmed. "And this baby in the photo is Lily." The world stopped for Bartholomew. Lily was his grandniece, Violet's daughter, the lost granddaughter of his family. "Violet passed away in a car accident 4 years ago," Eleanor continued, her voice choked. "Lily was only a few months old. Since Violet had never revealed her true identity to her husband's family, when he also died in the accident, the girl was placed in the foster care system." Lily slowly stood up and walked to Bartholomew. "Now you understand why Violet brought me to you," she said with her small but wise voice. "She wanted her family to be together again." Tears flowed freely down Bartholomew's face as he hugged Lily. Finally, everything made sense. The inexplicable connection he felt with the girl, the way she knew the mansion, the conversations with Violet. His niece had found a way to bring her daughter back home. But how did Lily know about the attic, about the family secrets? Isabel asked, moved. Eleanor smiled through her tears. Violet spent the last years of her life telling Lily stories about the mansion, about her childhood there, about the places she played, about the family she had left behind. Even when Lily was too young to fully understand, Violet planted these memories in her heart. Lily looked at the empty corner of the room and waved, as if saying goodbye to someone. "Violet says she can rest now," she said serenely. She found what she had been looking for so long. At that moment, Bartholomew felt a deep peace invade his heart. He had a family again. He had a reason to live, to build something beautiful. 2 weeks later, with Eleanor's documents proving Lily's family connection, Theodora withdrew her lawsuit. Confronted with the truth about the girl's identity and the legitimacy of Bartholomew's inheritance, she opted for a financial settlement that guaranteed her a small portion of the assets, but left the mansion and Lily's custody with Bartholomew. Isabel, who had become a fundamental part of both their lives, accepted Bartholomew's marriage proposal on a sunny afternoon in the restored mansion's garden. Lily was the first to hug them, radiant with happiness. "Now Violet has a complete family again," the girl said, dancing through the garden like the bird she always drew. 6 months later, the century-old mansion had been completely restored, retaining its historic charm, but gaining the warmth of a true home. The attic was transformed into a special room for Lily, where she carefully kept all of Violet's memories. Bartholomew discovered an unexpected calling for fatherhood, filling Lily's life with love, games, and stories about her biological mother. Isabel became the mother the girl had never had, caring for her with the dedication of someone who had finally found a second chance to love. And sometimes on sunny afternoons, when Lily played in the mansion's restored garden, Bartholomew and Isabel had the impression of seeing a second child running alongside her, a blonde girl, about 8 years old, who laughed and played as if she had finally found the peace she had sought for decades. The Vance family was complete again, united by a love that had transcended time, pain, and all the circumstances that tried to separate them. Lily would grow up knowing she belonged somewhere, that she was loved unconditionally, and that some love stories are so powerful that not even separation can destroy them. In the Fairhaven mansion, where once there had only been silence and abandonment, now echoed children's laughter, loving conversations, and the sound of a family that had found its way back home.